Hi everybody, how's it going? Owen Morrissey here, coaching officer with Waterford GAA. Thanks everybody coming along to our webinar tonight. I'm joined by Owen Mooney, and just before I give it a couple of maybe 30 seconds or so for a few more people to join, I just want to get a bit of a sense off Owen about a bit of his background and stuff like that. So Owen, tell me a bit about why you decided to start coaching in the first place, or how did you start coaching?
Good question. I actually got my first coaching qualification when I was 15 with the Irish Football Association. It was a Mini Soccer Leaders Award. So that was my first toe dip into coaching at that stage. And it was always something I was interested in. But that was mainly because of the coaches that I had as a young player. They filled me, provided a great environment. I enjoyed myself. I always came back. And then as I got older, learned things from all the other coaches that I had, and had taken bits and pieces from each of them, as well as the people I've met, including yourself, Owen, having known you when you're from your time in Cavan and my time in Fermanagh. So, and it's a constant journey at the minute. I'm always learning, always developing, and it's something that's very important to me.
So before I get stuck into the actual PowerPoint itself and the presentation, and I know you have a bit of background in maybe hurling to a little bit with your listening ski background, but I know football has probably been your prominent sport growing up, and you had a refereeing background as well, and that I know I did a referee myself. So what's your current opinion on the new mark in football? Are you pro it or against it, or a bit in between?
Good question. So if I was in New York in my previous role, Rockland GAA, I would be against it, mainly because the mark and 15 aside full rules is at under 10s. So that would be a reason why I would be against it. In terms of my own coaching, as a player, because I was a forward, I would be against it because of my size. So I wouldn't be the strongest in terms of winning the ball without the ball bouncing. But as a defender, I would enjoy it. Get the hand in, get the punch in, get the ball away. As a coach, I quite enjoy it. It's a challenge in terms of our setup as a team. I'm with Calgary this year in Westmeath with Roscommon legend Shane Curran again. So that has been a good challenge in terms of how we're going to set up. And then again, in the sense of the opposition that we're playing, the style of play, they might be a running team, or they might be a team, that might be suits them to put the ball in. So, and especially the way a team is playing now, they are adaptive, they're flexible. So, as a coach, it's a challenge, and I can see kind of both ends. So technically, for want of a better word, I have splinters in my bottom. I'm on the fence.
Good stuff. Good question. Very political question on. You might make it in politics as well. But I'm gonna just people are joining us there. We're going to start off here. So I'm delighted to join. Be welcomed by Owen Mooney. Deliver tonight's webinar, which is the 5th in the series of our webinars since January. As you all know, we've had to turn to webinars, I suppose, over on the field practical sessions, but they've been very, very beneficial and valuable to now. I suppose amazing, we've had over 1,500 coaches now registered for these events, which is a massive number. We've also been providing a number of Foundation Award 1 courses throughout this period, which have been very well received by coaches and clubs, and we'll continue to do so all throughout the course of the year. So Owen is currently the Learning and the Games Development Coordinator for Dublin GAA, and is a Doctorate of Professional Practice candidate at Leeds Beckett University in the Carnegie School of Sport, where his research is titled Play and Sport, Understanding the Role of Play for Children and Coaches. So it's a really, really timely workshop, hopefully when we're leading into maybe getting back out onto the field. So as in his previous roles, he was National Coach and Sports Development Coordinator for Special Olympics Ireland, Games Development Officer at Rockland Gaelic Athletic Association Club in New York. I suppose before he went to New York, and when I knew him more so, he was the Department of Education, Physical Literacy Curriculum Coach and Development Officer with Ulster GAA, working with children from 4 to 8 year old, and has been then seconded to the position of Ulster Ladies Gaelic as Provincial Development Officer. So he's a vast array of experience in different sports, different demographics within sports also. As some of you might know, he's a real passion for learning and has a very keen interest in child development and coach education. And as some of you might have listened to the ICOACHKIDS Podcast, which is now in partnership with Nike. So he's really after getting, I suppose, the whole agenda of coaching children right into the global framework. I suppose as a coach developer, Owen also presented at the GAA's National Games Development Conference in 2011-2019, the Ulster GAA Coaching Games Conference in 2012, and the UK National Coaching Conference at Ulster University in 2011. as well as a large number of club development and county development workshops and webinars. So Owen has been a coach developer for over 12 years and has facilitated a vast amount of coach education courses and coach development workshops and webinars all over Ireland as well as England, for Herefordshire GAA, Britain GAA, and in the United States for Rockland and all across the USA, I'd probably imagine, Owen. I suppose throughout this presentation, we'll be asking questions, people to contribute, and if you have any questions, they can be typed into the question and answer section where we'll put them to Owen at the end of the webinar. So now I'm going to hand over to Owen to begin the presentation entitled Play and Stay with Waterford GAA.
Sure, thanks Owen for the introduction, and to Waterford GAA for the invite to take part in the Déise Spring webinar series. Owen talked about my experiences there. However, the more experience you are, the more mistakes you make, and I'll definitely be talking a lot about that later on throughout the webinar. Thanks all of you for kind of taking the time to jump on the session. Really appreciate it, and congratulations on Waterford GAA and Déise in terms of what you're doing. To have 1,500 coaches registered for your webinars is testament to the work you're doing. So congratulations on that. So before I go any further, I want to get a sense of kind of your wants, your needs, and your ways. So don't worry, there's a method and a rationale and a purpose for everything I do. Even though it mightn't seem like that, I promise it is. And this is one of them. So using the chat function, if you could let me know what you want to get from this webinar. Why did you sign up for it? Did Owen Morrissey and Waterford GAA send you and your club a forceful email? I don't know whether that's the reason why there's 1,500. I doubt it, but you never know. And maybe what are you hoping to gain from the webinar? Now, Barry is going to feed back to me while this is happening, but before he does, I will be engaging you throughout the webinar. I'm not trying to catch you out. If you're comfortable putting things into the chat function, brilliant. If not, that's okay. All I ask is that you kind of have a notepad and pen in front of you to make notes for your own context and your own reflection. So again, what do you hope to get from the webinar? Why did you sign up for it? And what are you hoping to gain from the session? And Barry will feed back to me. Hopefully there is stuff coming in and that there's not tumbleweed and silence. If it is, that's okay. But is there anything coming in, Barry?
Yep, somebody's just after saying there that they just want to expand their knowledge of coaching. So I suppose, look, that's a great starting point for any webinar when you're probably dialing that you just want to broaden your horizons, and you probably will reference that, I suppose, during the presentation about the importance of always pushing yourself on and probably not just sitting back and waiting to learn stuff, is getting out there and probably getting active with it. So yeah, that's what's after coming in so far anyway.
Class. So I'm going to move on, and again, guys, you can put into the chat function as much as you can. There is a reason for me doing it, and it helps me in terms of my own reflections. Any webinar I do is helping me in terms of my research because of the nature of my research. And I don't want to go too much into my research because it'll kind of deviate, but every webinar I do builds up my resources. So it helps me in terms of my coaching, my research, but also in terms of my coaching practice. And that's the biggest thing I want from tonight. And why I started off for that little task at the start is because I'm curious about everything. I'm always asking why, just like Mindy from Animaniacs that you see on screen. Where I'll ask why and how and what are we doing that several times until I realise that the person I'm asking is getting more and more exacerbated by my questions, so getting angry or getting annoyed at me. Now, I won't do what Mindy does in Animaniacs and say, okay, I love you, bye-bye. But I will kind of think and reflect about my questions and the answers I'm getting. And then I might go more purposeful in terms of my questions. Now, by doing this, I'm not trying to be difficult, even though in the past that has been the impression I've given. Owen Marcy knows me a little bit more, so he knows I'm not trying to be difficult, not doing it just to mess about. I always want to know why. I'm always curious. So I want to gain a better understanding of what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and why I'm doing a particular task, for example, as a player or as a coach. Because of that sentiment, you know, we learn best when problems and questions come before solutions and answers. This webinar is a mix of research-backed insights of my own coaching experiences as well, and reflections to help you think about your coaching practice. So you will take what you wish from this webinar. My aim is to try and get you to reflect on your own practices and leave you with more questions than answers. Kind of what works for me and Barry mightn't work for the two Owens, Owen Brannock and Owen Morrissey on the call. And it mightn't work so seamlessly for all of you on the call. But what I hope for you to happen during this webinar is that I hope you gain a few what if questions or I wonder questions. I wonder, would this work in my context? Or what if I tried it like this instead of like this? And that expanding your coaching knowledge and broadening your horizons is what I want to get you to take from this webinar. Is it's not me telling you what to do. I won't be giving you a list of takeaways at the end of this, because that would be me telling you what you should do. It would be my takeaways, and again, it would be me telling you what to do. And I don't tell people what to do, just like I don't tell the children or the players in my sessions what to do. I probe, I guide, I collaborate, I reflect with them, I ask them questions, I embrace the chaos. But again, this is my context. Now, in fairness, there is some groups that I will tell them what to do, and I'll go into a little bit about that when I would do it later on and why. But most of the time, it's collaborating with them, depending on their behaviour, of course. So again, you'll take what you want from this webinar, but you'll take what's best for you, your players, your fellow coaches, and again, your teams. The model that you see on screen has been adopted from Andy Abraham, Dave Collins and Bob Muir, and it's helped me kind of in my decision making when I'm coaching. So your practice, which is my practice, my way, who I'm coaching, what I'm coaching, how I'm coaching through the medium of playing games. So as Owen talked about, it's play and stay with Waterford GAA. And this webinar, this here is kind of a one-stop shop in terms of what the webinar is going to be about. Initially games, a lot of games and a lot of play. The games acronym that you see on screen is from the new Introduction to Gaelic Games course that has been held off in terms of being rolled out because of the COVID pandemic. But in terms of play, I'll go into play, discovery play, collaborative, but more purposeful as well. And I'm doing that because of the ages of the coaches who are here and the ages that you work with. And normally I have child needs and wants, but again, because of the coaches here, that it's youth coaches and adult coaches, myself included, it's to prepare the person for the path, not the path for the person. So whenever I think about coaching, it's not just me and it's not just the players. Everybody has a role to play. So the child, the youth, the adult player, person, their family, their friends, the relationships that they have, school, coach, teacher, club, and the community. Everybody has a role to play. So it's not just me and the player, and it's not just me and my coach, it's everybody. And again, I'll go into a little bit more about that later on. So I am person-centered as a coach always. I work with 3 to 6 year olds and or adults. I'll do workshops and sessions kind of with other age groups, but I will not coach them for a season. I'll always work with children or adults, and there's a reason for that. Crack being the biggest one, and enjoyment, but also an opportunity to trial and error, try new things, have a go, test the water, for want of a better word as well, and kind of creating a love for the game and what they're doing so that they come back again as many as possible, for as long as possible, in the best environment possible. Now, winning for me is a long way down my list of priorities. It's their game, it's their team, it's their club, it's their learning. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not competitive and that the 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds that I work with and the adults are not competitive. How I structure the sessions hones the competitive element by not focusing on the winning as the most important. You know, it's development comes before everything. And again, I want to create that love for the game. And the best way I can describe making sense of everything is Netflix and Sega. So Netflix, the most person-centered platform there is. And for me as a coach, everything is related to the players that I am working with, to the people that I'm working with when I'm coaching. So I'm not coaching footballers or hurlers or camogie players in my eyes. I'm coaching people who happen to play Gaelic football, hurling or camogie. It's the person first always, and trying to create value, connection, and building trust, building that environment, because then that's going to help down the line in terms of the games and the teams, etc. And in relation to their needs and their wants, Sega comes in. So gamification, I'll go into a little bit more about that later on, just in terms of the approaches I use. So in terms of play, and again, making sense of the research, this is how I make sense of things, is by using characters so I can remember things. And I think of play as exploration, enjoyment, fun, kind of, again, creating a love for the game, the sport, the club environment, and the community as well. But it's also about skill acquisition, learning, collaboration, social relationships. So Scott Herbel suggests that play has 6 basic elements that are present whenever someone is fully immersed in play. And again, these 6 elements, I am going to look at them, make sense of them through characters. Now, I'm also going to do it through player and as a coach. And there's, again, the purpose for what I'm doing. So the first one, as you can see on screen, is Buzz Lightyear, who is anticipation. So to infinity and beyond, and that waiting for expectation to go to practice as a player, whether you're a child, youth or adult, thinking about what's to come or meeting your friends, that curiosity of unknowing and the desire to go. But then it can be, as a coach, you know, anticipation, planning your session, you're not sure what's going to happen, but you're excited and you want to go to practice as a coach. So that then lends itself then to surprise. Now, the surprise as a player could be, and through the research, is the unexpected. It's a new discovery or new idea. Now, that surprise can be positive or negative, can be happy or sad. As a coach, the surprise for you could be that you're locked out of the practice, that the weather is poor, that there's not enough turning up to your sessions, and you'll have to change your session because of that. That could then happen twofold. So it could be pleasure, depending on your situation. So the surprise could be a positive, which then leads to bugs in terms of pleasure, smiling, a good feeling, happiness, fun. But it could be a negative, or not a negative, but a constructive feeling. So fear. But again, how are you gonna kind of alleviate that? So you're planning and being able to be flexible and adaptable in your plans is going to help that. So then the pleasure will come back. But knowing as a coach that you're having a hugely positive impact, no matter what happens. If you're positive, that's your role as a coach, is creating that environment builder. You're the top of the orchestra. You're not delegating. You're kind of making sure that everybody's okay, everybody's safe, but that they're enjoying themselves. And then that lends itself to understanding. So the aha moment or the epiphany. And again, a new knowledge or understanding of a problem or a concept or a skill that you previously couldn't do, but then you can do. And you've went over certain steps, so you've tried things out, hasn't worked, and then you get it. It's aha, it's understanding, which then leads to Yoda, which is strength. And in the research, Yoda for me would be mastery. Again, mastery comes from understanding. So it's not just enough to know. To know something is completely different than to understand it. And having that experience of going more in depth, but again, coming over and being aware of the new skills and concepts and the kind of tough times that you would have went through as a coach, making mistakes, that's strength. So that then, as a coach, you can become more confident, more experienced. That then leads to poise. That doesn't mean that you're Elsa and that you're composed all the time. And it doesn't mean that you're content, but it just means that you have more confidence in yourself as a coach. You know, you're able to train, you're able to practice, and you're able to adapt and be flexible. Same as a player, whether you're playing a different position. I started off as a corner forward. I ended up being a corner back. Take that for what you will about my playing ability. However, I had played so many different positions, I enjoyed it. And I got an experience of playing those different positions and being aware of different roles. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that later on. But just like development, all of this is not linear. So once you finish poise and you go back to, Owen talked about the mark. So trying to coach the mark. You might go back all the way to buzz, but you might come in at bugs, or you might come in at understanding, the aha moment. It depends on your knowledge and understanding and where you come in as a coach, and the help and the mentoring and the help that you get from your coaching team, but also your club also. I added this in. I normally have this in on my webinars, but I added this in because of Waterford GAA and what you're doing. So in relation to Waterford GAA's kind of Well Kids initiative and the clubs that are going to be piloting the programme, play is key. And children have a legally enshrined right to play, and it's guaranteed in international law from the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. in 1989. So think about that. The two rights are, as you'll see on screen, Article 12 and Article 31. So Article 12 is the right to be heard, asking questions, asking them reviews, getting them to make up their games, talking with their friends, thinking about their needs and wants. They have their own views, experiences, perspectives, and it's not just for children. This is for adults and youth players as well. And a 3-year-old will give their opinion. So again, doesn't matter what age they are. Nothing about us without us. And it's the same for Article 31, which is the right to play. It's their game, not ours. Article 31 recognises the importance of play. It's self-directed by the children, for the children, by the youth players, for the youth players, by the adults, for the adults as well, depending on what age group you're coaching. So one of the things that, in terms of the Well Kids programme, and I'll pose this question, can we all be play friendly? I will say absolutely, and especially now. And again, the Play Kids project, along with the Ulster GAA's Gaelic Star programme and several other initiatives from other disciplines and sports from around the world, is a great way to go. So hat tip to Waterford GAA in terms of that Well Kids programme, and any clubs that haven't signed up to the Well Kids programme. I don't know whether sign up is still happening, but I do know that that the pilot clubs will be picked soon. So get on it if you're not on it already. So in terms of my coaching, I kind of stick to my philosophy of coaching and how I coach, again, being person-centered, games and play. The family of games is kind of helps me a lot in terms of my coaching practice. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on this slide, but just to talk about the target games, chasing and fleeing, I would class them as target games. So games of tag games, object, space, person, goal, whatever that is, that's a target. Court games, over the river, define space, etc., kicking into another area, short tennis, whatever that is, that again, they're court games. Field games, rounders, perfect example, great game, striking, fielding, kicking rounders, doesn't matter what way it is, phenomenal game. And it's something that I do with 4-year-olds as well as adults. It's probably the best game in relation to teaching tactical awareness through the game. Fantastic. Non-invasion, part invasion, full invasion, again, depending on your age group. Non-invasion can be target as well in terms of team ball pass, and I'll go into a little bit more about later on. Part invasion games, so scout ball and part invasion and court games can be linked. Target games and non-invasion can be linked. Target games and full invasion games can be linked. Field games and target can be linked. So there's not just one or the other, and you just don't go round in a linear fashion. They can be picked and chosen from any different way. And again, it's up to you to think about your own coaching context, your own group, challenging them, but not making it too hard, but also not making it too easy, and levels. So that's where the Sega comes in. And again, full invasion, but so moving kind of into the opponent's territory to score. And again, we all think of that, that's 15 aside. However, 1v1, me trying to get past Owen Morrissey, that's a full invasion game. So again, 1v1, 2v2, all the way up to 15v15. So the model that you see kind of has been adapted from a model that I got from my former line manager at Ulster GAA, good mentor of mine and a good friend, in fairness as well, Terence McWilliams. And I've been adapting it for my own research, but also for me to make sense of it in terms of how it applies to my context. It looks complicated, however, with a little bit of adult play, otherwise known as trial and error. When you break it down, it's as simple as you want it to make it. So the example that I'm going to give is field games. So 1 against 1. Now, normally I would start off 1 with 1, but again, there's a method to the madness, so bear with me here. So 1v1, and again, I've put it that we're going to look at ground kicking. However, I can look at hand striking, hold, and hit. I can look at using the hurl, using the bat, doesn't matter. Again, whatever your context, this is just an example. So we're looking at ground kicking, obviously with the foot. And as a fielder, so Barry Dunn, I'm playing against Barry. Barry has the ball, he is the batter or the kicker. I am looking at fielding the ball, so getting there as quick as I can and not making him get loads of points, basically, because I'm playing with him. We're going to use a medium-sized ball, can use a softball, it doesn't matter, again, depending on what your own context is. Barry is kicking the space. He's not going to kick it to me, obviously. If he does kick it to me the first time, the next time as a coach, don't stop it. The next time Barry kicks it, if he kicks it to me a second time, you might want to think about stepping in. If Barry kicks it to me a third time, you have to step in because Barry just doesn't get the game. Now, Barry wouldn't be like that. This is more my end. This is more, I would have done that. I would have kicked it to the person. But because Barry goes first, he kicks it to me, and I think, yes, I'm not going to do that. But then I kick it away from Barry, so I get more points. And without even realising it, Barry has become more creative then, and Barry's thinking, right, well, he kicked it away, he got more points. That's interesting. But we're playing in 6 different games, so this is set up in 6 different areas. So even though me and Barry are playing against each other, there's another 5 teams that we're playing against. So me and Barry will add up our scores. And let's say we get 9. The other 5 teams are playing, and we finish second. So the other team got 12 for the highest score. So me and Barry are still playing with each other, but we're also playing against each other. And then the own rules come in. When Barry figures out that he kicks it in the space, but then Barry scratches his head and he's walking in, and Barry goes, okay, so Owen kicked it in front towards me, but in the space. I done that as well. The coach, Owen Brannock is the coach, and Owen didn't say I couldn't do this. I'm gonna do it. So Barry, instead of kicking towards me as the kicker, Barry turns around and kicks it way behind himself. Goes, touches the cones, keeps the score. I run past Barry, get the ball, come back, touch the cone. He's got so many more points than me because he's been creative. He's thought about it. And as a coach, I would never stop that. However, if the other players started doing that, I would change it, because then you're bringing in games for understanding, and you're bringing in kind of game-based coaching. So you're thinking about, okay, well, you would stop it and you won't shout at Barry because he's been creative. He's been Promethean. But you might think, well, can we think of a game in rounders? There's the foul ball line. And even if you're playing not in rounders or baseball, there is a foul ball. It can't go outside the court or the area, the field, without it bouncing. And obviously you can't kick it behind yourself or hit it behind yourself. So then you brought in an extra rule and you're keeping the points. So again, 1v1, and then you'll keep moving up, and then it'll become 4 against 4, full rounders, bases loaded, etc. And that's just building it up, games for understanding, teaching games for understanding. I'm not going to go too much into that because I know that Barry Milan is on one of the other webinars coming up, and I know for a fact Barry will be talking about games-based and teaching games for understanding. So this is just to give you my context again. So this here playing continuum that you see is kind of a guide that Jerry O'Connor developed, and it's in his and Dublin GAA's Gives a Game 2nd edition. Now, it's evidence-based and it's within the GAA context. However, if I'm a player at under 6, obviously me and my ball is so important. Now, I'm nearly 38 and I'm not playing anymore. However, I don't know many players, adult players, that will not want a ball of their own. So even though stage 1 is for under 6s, it's for all players. And everybody likes to play. Everybody wants to play games. They want to get involved. And again, this here is obviously related to children and youth, the lower end of youth, but it's for adults and youth players as well. And for coaches, we all love to play, and to try and learn in a different way instead of the traditional element of isolated practices. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail with that later on. But it's not just the GAA context. So I know quite a few people on this call would have been at the GAA conferences, and not even the one that I was speaking at, but Chris Van de Hagen spoke at the 2020 GAA conference, and he was on our Dublin GAA coach webinar series, speaking about the coaching switch. I've had him on the podcast as well. He is a partner, as well as the Royal Belgian Football Association, with ICOACHKIDS, and their method of vision for youth development was about one plan, one mission, one vision. But there was challenges in that because they needed a coaching switch for the coaches to stop thinking about their team and their results and start thinking about each individual player. And he talks about that from grassroots all the way up. The only thing that changes is the size of the jersey. So what Waterford are trying to do, Dublin and other counties and other clubs, is to have a plan and a structure in place that throughout the pathway, the players are supported and coaches are supported. And it's so important, rather than having coaches going off, being like a splinter group and doing their own thing at their age group. It's not about that. It's about a team. And that includes not only the players, but the coaches and the club and the community as well. And again, it's not just about kind of the GAA context. Like at under 6s, you'll see there, me and my ball, so it's 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, whatever that is, moving all the way up. And it's about the development of the player, the development of the game. And remember, it's their game. It's their sport. It's not ours as coaches. We're just the facilitators. And just remember that and think about that in your coaching. And in my practice, I don't mind chaos. I love chaos. I coach through chaos all the time. I love making mistakes. Doesn't bother me. Like I make mistakes all the time in my coaching, every single session. I'm comfortable doing that. And there's coaches who are not comfortable doing that. And maybe that's why they will stay with the isolated practices and the drill based. And I hate the word drills because if you want to drill, go to B&Q in fairness, but isolated activities. And if that's your domain, that's your rationale, all I would get you to do is have a go. And again, hopefully what I'm going to talk about later on will make you think about, oh, I wonder if that will work in my context, as I said earlier on. So I'm going to talk about kind of 3 different elements. So play, practice, play. This is no different from whole, part, whole that you would have heard on any coach education course with the GAA. But play, practice, play, the US soccer. I done a webinar for the American Youth Soccer Organization a few weeks ago, and the play, practice, play is part of US soccer in terms of youth development, and I love it mainly because of how I coach, but also because of my research. Links very well with my research, but also it's whole, part, whole, but it's discovery, collaborative, and purposeful. And again, I'm going to go into more detail on that and show you some of the examples that I will do. Now, in preparation for the second engagement, I want you to listen to my descriptions and watch the videos and make some notes about my setups within a GAA context, and think about which approach would best suit your needs if you were coaching a session tomorrow. And this picture is from Terence McWilliams, and Terence, obviously, as you'll probably be more aware now, has a very big influence on me. And this is a sample setup that he done for a webinar that we done with Derry GAA a few weeks ago. But again, it just shows kind of a sample setup. And again, everything that I'm going to show you now in the next 3 screens, have a think about it. But also, it's not what you should do. It's my context. You can increase or decrease the numbers, increase the size or decrease the size, take out a number of games, whatever that is. This is my context, just giving you a couple of things to think about. What if questions or I wonder questions. So, first one is a video of discovery. So this is a video of me or group in Rockland, under 6s and under 8s. So it's show me, have a go. They all have different pieces of equipment. Some of them don't even have any piece of equipment, but it's all about them. Now there is a rationale for the session, so it's handling. In case you probably got that, because they're all using their hands in some way. But you see they're hopping, you see them working with their partner, but also, and one of the things I want to focus on is parent engagement. So you will see all the adults, and this is discovery as well. So all the parents around the side, they knew how many were coming. And all I asked them, if you didn't want to get involved in the coaching, you have to stay. Under 6 and under 8s, any club I'm with, my own club in Rockland, any club I work with, under 6 and under 8s, the parents have to stay. Not only to be coaches, but also to create a community for themselves. The children are the guinea pigs. They're making their friends. They're having fun. They're enjoying themselves. And they will want to come back, but I want the parents to want to come back. So they're talking to each other, but they also had to talk to somebody that they didn't know, to get to know them, to get to know and build up a community for themselves. But in terms of my coaching, why I did that, for the children, it's autonomy supportive. So there's loads of choice. There's limits. They can't beat the head of each other. Obviously, they have to be safe. So there's certain rules, and normally those rules are from the parents or from the school, but also from our coaches and what we expect of the children. But there's also a rationale for everything that we're doing, hence the different equipment, but also why we want the parents there. Now, this is not just for parents. This is for adults, and this is a video of my last webinar. Sorry, my last workshop face-to-face in Hertfordshire GAA. So again, discovery, give them equipment, give them their own area. All they had to do is make up their games. Now, I could be then more collaborative, and I was more collaborative for the people who were sitting down, playing their game. I was also collaborative in terms of the groups after this video, asking them what they're doing, maybe challenging them to make it a little bit more harder, maybe get some more movement in. But being purposeful in terms of Stephen and his partner who were sitting down, being more purposeful, I went over to them and said, great game, but you have to stay on your feet now. So automatically that changes their game without me even having to say anything extra. So there's discovery, there's collaborative in this, challenging the groups, asking them what they're doing, getting their rules, and maybe challenging them or making it easier, but also purposeful in relation to their needs and their wants. So I know that they need help with their handling. So then I'm going to be more purposeful to try and think, okay, well, you're pretty good at catching and you've tried the hand pass, so maybe you would want to try the hand pass. Or trying to hold a hurl or hold a racket and try and catch the ball, or holding an object and going to try and pick the ball up if you're looking at hurling or camogie. So again, whatever your context. In relation to play, the first element, play, practice, play, discovery, this is something similar. So this is more obviously game-based and more related to kind of the GAA context. And again, football or hurling, doesn't matter. Now, this is discovery, but it's internal games. And in Rockland, and again, any club that I encourage, if they practice twice a week, I encourage them to have one practice, all games. Pick the teams, set up the pitches, play games. That's it. No coaching. Don't be telling them what to do. Let them play the games, referee the games, that's it. Now you'll see there that there's 3 pitches, it's 5v5, there's 7 teams. Now again, in Rockland at under 10s and under 8s, there was 7 teams. There was 7 teams of 8 and 9 players, depending on the team. But in pitch 1, let's say both those teams only had 4 players out of each team coming. Well, it's 4v4, and that's the amount of players they're playing with. Pitch 3, it could be 7v7. It doesn't matter. Whatever the number of players there, that's the number that play. The group on the right-hand side that you will see, the small group with the coach. So you will see that one is observing, resting, practicing, or chatting. The coach is there for crowd control, basically, making sure they don't punch the head of each other or mess about. However, you can be more purposeful in terms of, okay, you might be watching, you might want to practice your skills, but I don't want you doing anything. So watch the games and watch one player who's playing, keep your eyes on them, observe them, and tell me what one thing that they're doing really well. Now, you might go over as a coach, that coach might go over and say, oh, Barry, who are you watching? And Barry was watching the game, but Barry just zoned out and Barry wasn't really concentrating. And Barry goes, oh, I can't remember. That's fine, there's no odds on that. Because Barry wasn't punching the head of anybody beside him. And Barry was behaving and he was safe. So that's the main issue. The main thing that you want is them to be safe. But then you can try and engage them, maybe to be a referee, and I'll go into a little bit more about that later on. But as you see here, it doesn't have to be that number of players. So one of the groups in Rockland was at under 14. And when we brought this in, he and the coaches in the ladies football and camogie end had a little bit more difficulty at under 14, mainly because of Fela. So Rockland GAA in New York would have a lot of their players would make up the New York Fela team, which obviously impacted on the club practices. So one of the coaches, and they would come back to me, well, how can we play games if we don't have enough players for teams? And I said, listen, 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, let them play against each other, have a little bit of competition. They're playing games, that's all I want. And then it was like a light bulb moment. As soon as I thought, oh yeah, we could do that, no problem. They would tailor the size of the pitches, get the children to make up the pitches, the size of the pitch is what we want. Now that's good crack, in fairness. You might have a group of 6-year-olds if you do that, and I would encourage you maybe to do that, just see what happens. And the pitch is the size of that blue area for 1v1. Obviously, you're going to have to change it as a coach, but again, you've understood their opinion, you value their opinion, and etc. But again, it just gives you a sense of where they are. But it's all about games, and it's all about play. Now, then if you want kind of over a few weeks, and you're bringing in more practice, so you're thinking about their needs, and you're watching the games, the internal games, and your second practice is more game related, but more practice related. So you might have pitch 1 and pitch 2 are playing against each other, whether it's a target game. So pitch 1 and pitch 2, you're playing team ball pass. Every time they pass the ball in their group, they get a point. Great. So the coach stops, and red team have 5 passes, and yellow team have 55 passes. Now, the rule on that was, the only rule that the coach said is pass the ball in your group. Every time you pass it, you get a point. Now then, me and Owen Morrissey have thought, okay, every time we get a point, every time we pass the ball, we get a point. Now, the coach did not say that we had to pass to everybody on our team. So me and Owen Morrissey are standing in front of each other, handing the ball to each other, because we know if we throw it or kick it, it could go awry. We want to get as many points we can because we're so competitive. We want to beat the other team. Great, that's class. Now, as a coach, you're then going to change that. And the next rule you bring in, brilliant. Owen, two Owens, fantastic creativity. However, let's be fair. Let's get everybody involved. And then me and Owen are laughing and sniggering because we've been really creative. But also now we're going to be team players now. And then that's too easy. First, then we look at court games. So over the river, you play with youth players, children, adults. And then that's too easy. So then you go to maybe part invasion, so scout ball. So as you'll see, certain number of players are on a certain side and you have to pass the ball across the area, across the river, whatever it is, to the players in your team. Now, obviously, when you're playing scout ball, you're not going to have 9 balls that you see on the screen in pitch 1 or 2. You're going to have 1 or 2, depending on the challenge that you want to bring out. Pitch 3 and 4 is very similar. Pitch 4 might be make-up games. All right, that's where they get to make up their own games. Doesn't matter what it is. But then you can be more purposeful in terms of their wants. So I don't care what you do, folks, as long as you're safe, stay in your area, everybody's involved, but use your hands. Or you must strike it off both sides. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But that's you being more purposeful. But you're giving them that choice. So you're ticking off Article 12, the rights of the child. And you're also ticking off Article 31 throughout all of this. And then full invasion, pitch 3 is 3v3, 2v2, 4v4, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You could flip the pitch and you can have it like we had beforehand, like this. So all the way across, whatever way you want to do it is fine. And again, it's your context. Now the middle end, so PA, you will see is the practice area. And again, depending on your numbers, and probably the practice area, the coach in the practice area is probably the most important, because this is where they'll be observing, racing, practicing or chatting. And this is where you can kind of engage with the players and maybe just get to know them, just talk to them. How's school been? How are you getting on, etc. So all of that is so important also. And it's a good way of getting to know them, creating that connection, creating that relationship with your players, and also getting them to become mini referees. So this here element would be practice, but also it's play practice. And then this here element, the last one is more purposeful. So this is the coach with the child, youth or adult, and in this one, so if you can imagine, we started 4v4, all right, endurance runs, and I have everything set up, me and my coach have everything set up, and we go from endurance runs to sprint relay all the way up to your 4v4 kicking, all the way down, all the way back up to squat medicine balls. Show them what they're doing, tell them what they're doing, show them everything that happens, but then go back to endurance runs, and as a coach, I'm scratching my head, and I go, oh, I can't remember what we do here. What are we doing? And Sinead sticks her hand up and goes, we're doing endurance runs. It's 1v1. Here's how we do it. We get to play against everybody. Brilliant. Sinead, class. Thank you so much. You're captain of endurance runs. Do that for all the other games. And then we have kind of discipline and behaviour, because Owen Morrissey is at endurance runs and Owen Mooney loves being with Owen Morrissey because we will mess about if we're in the same group as each other. Now, as a coach, you know that. So you don't want that to happen, obviously. So Owen Morrissey is going to be at endurance runs and Owen Mooney is going to be at squat medicine balls. Don't worry about the name of the games, it's just an example. We don't use medicine balls, so don't worry about that. For adults even, I wouldn't even use them. Not that much. But for children, I'm keeping the 2 Owens away as a coach because I don't want them to upset the group. But also the other coaches that you see here, the C's, are your parent coaches, are your new coaches. You don't have to have that many coaches. This here does not have to be one session. On the left-hand side, that could be one session, 4 grids, rotate around. Could be the middle section, week 2. And on the right, that could be week 3. So again, it's your context. But it's a great way to engage the parents, engage the coaches. And if you can imagine me looking at 4v4 kicking, I'm the coach. And then Owen Morrissey is the head coach of the under-10s. And the parents there's a couple of parents staying, and Barry Dunn is one of the parents, and Owen goes over to Barry and asks Barry, Barry, can you get involved? Would you like to coach? And Barry goes, yeah, okay. But I'm going to put Barry with an experienced coach, so less pressure, and then you're obviously going to increase his confidence and increase whoever's the coach, whether it's male or female, doesn't matter. But it's a great way of bringing them into the group. And if they don't want to be coaches, that's fine. Ask them again a second time. If they say no a second time, then ask them to be a volunteer, collecting money, or doing the role, or giving out some of the hampers at a fun day, or whatever that is. It doesn't matter. But you're building up that volunteerism within the club, not just as coaches. Again, this is play, practice, play. So this is more purposeful. So thinking about all of that, right? And from listening to my descriptions, all right, of purposeful or discovery, collaborative, and purposeful, which approach would you use to suit your needs if you're doing a coaching session tomorrow? So would it be use the chat function, enter, if it's discovery, all discovery, put in number 1. If it's collaborative, put in number 2. If it's purposeful, put in number 3, or a mix of 2, or put in a mix of 3. So again, while you're having a think and while you're putting into the chat function, and Barry, you can kind of feedback to me of what's coming in. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. This is your context, and it's up to you what you do. It's up to the help that you get. That's very important. And again, folks, this is just a whirlwind of everything. You have my contact details in the PDF that Owen and the lads are going to send. Contact me if you want more information or some examples. But again, I just want to get a sense of where you are. And again, this is anonymous, so Owen and Barry is not going to mention your name. Just gives me a sense of where you are and hopefully how I've explained it. So anything coming in there, Barry?
Yeah, so somebody's after coming back saying, I think I would use 1 and 2 primarily. So I suppose a mixture of the discovery and the collaborative side of things. We have another one in here, a mix of all 3. So that's what's in so far anyway, Owen.
Class. The 1, so that's great. Mix of 2, mix of 3. It depends on your context. However, depending on your group, and going back to Owen Morrissey and Owen Mooney being messers, I had a group when I was in one of my schools with Ulster GAA, and I've talked about them on some webinars and in some conferences, and I have got permission to do that because their teacher was one of the examples that I use in a case study. But there was 24 boys in the class and 5 girls, and there wasn't enough girls to be leaders in each of the groups for collaborative and discovery. And plus, there were proper wee boys and proper wee girls that they just wanted to play pig games. So if I turned my back once, they were climbing the walls, climbing the stage. So I had to be more purposeful and I had to be more direct, but I was doing it through games. So again, it depends on your context. There is no right or wrong answer. Coaching is a negotiation, and I was negotiating with them because I wanted this from the session. They want this. But they think what I'm doing is this, so it's their wants, when really I know that it's this, and I'm focusing on their needs and what their needs are to improve skill development or whatever it is. So by using discovery, collaborative, and purposeful approaches, all 3 in different ages, in different aspects, and depending on your context, and again, in my context, using the magic principles that you see on screen at different times and with different groups, kind of allows me to meet their needs and wants of the people in the sessions, especially my work previously with Special Olympics, being inclusive, but also person-centered, I talked about earlier on in terms of Netflix, different playing positions, but I think it's very important for different roles also, to even 4 and 5 year olds experiencing being a referee. So in a group of 3, playing 1v1, keep the kettle boiled, handball, and the other person is refereeing, just counting the scores, and then we rotate around. Acting as a mini coach, that's going to get them to think about respecting differences of themselves, their players, their coaches, the club, the community, but also opposition players, opposition coaches, especially opposition clubs, but also what it's like to be a referee, which is extremely difficult, as Owen Mooney will testify to. So that element of respecting differences, different roles, will help that, no matter what age they are. So just a couple of things kind of to wrap things up, folks. As I said earlier on, the coach's role is kind of the environment designer. And as a coach, we facilitate player environments and interactions. It's not about us, remember, it's about them. So through feedback and kind of the dream plan, as you can see here, is not linear. That's the dream. However, in reality, we know that that's very different. Development, especially learning and human development, is very different. It's like the games that we coach, it's complete chaos. So for me, I take my time in coaching. I have patience, little hat tip to Guns N' Roses. However, I only have patience when I'm coaching, and my wife will testify to that. I don't have patience in anything else, just when I'm coaching. And especially to coach 3-year-olds and to coach adults, I have more patience with 3-year-olds sometimes than I have with adults. And again, that's not a fault in any of the adults. It's just sometimes that's just the way it is because of the context. But slow and steady wins the race all the time, and having patience and just taking your time, having a go at things. On the screen, you will see a quote from Mike Singletary, who is a Hall of Fame NFL player. If you asked a 6-year-old, a 14-year-old, or a 30-year-old player, would they give a similar answer? All right, I think so. Now, some people might disagree on that, but playing games are not a reward, and there is an essential ingredient, I feel, in terms of player, person, and skill development. And again, never forget that it's important that we all play. It's not just for children. And I feel that the family of games help me do that in terms of trial and error and having a go. So right now, all of us kind of have a chance to be a future maker. So be Promethean. I said about being Promethean earlier on, and I came up with my kind of mini Viva for my research, and the chairman of my COR, Professor Jim McKenna, who's going to be on the podcast soon, said, "Oh, why don't you be Promethean?" I hadn't a clue what he was talking about. But when I went back and read it, Prometheus was a Greek demigod who was banished for being creative and boldly original. So being creative is very important for me in my coaching, in my context. And as a coach, taking a chance, we're taking a chance. We've ventured outside our comfort zone as a coach. We're all Rapunzels. We are all hitting ourselves in the face with the frying pan after every session. And making mistakes, that's the frying pan. And it's fine. Don't worry about that. To be Merlins, we have to have a go. And if you're hitting yourself in the face with the frying pan, you are having a go because you're making mistakes. You're trying new things. You're asking questions. You're providing choice. You're being Promethean. And collaborating with other coaches, other sports, kind of staying positive no matter what is so important. I recommend all of these resources, obviously, especially ICOACHKIDS, Dublin GAA, Waterford GAA as well. Also GAA Connected Coaches is a UK coaching kind of sideline in terms of blogs, Special Olympics, but also Sport Ireland coaching, GAA learning, as well as Sport NI, but also other sports. And probably the biggest one for me, as you'll see circled, is Mentors and Critical Friends. And that's had the biggest influence in terms of my own coaching. Development never stops. Never stop learning because development never stops. And having mentors and critical friends, I find, are probably the easiest way to do that. But again, it can be very challenging as well. So if you take nothing from this webinar, please, 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 no laps. No laps, no matter what, no laps. Now, if you follow me on Twitter, you will see that I put this up earlier on, and Andy Abraham kind of came in on the conversation. And Andy, as I talked about earlier on, in terms of his model, is looks after the understanding expertise part of the doc prof at Leeds Beckett. So I know for a fact Andy is not doing laps and lanes all the time, and it was in his context. So I know he's doing games, but he was being a bit of devil's advocate. But again, it was his context. However, I know that he's not doing this also. That it's all about the coach. It's not about the coach. It's about the players. So please, no lines either. All right. It's their game, not ours. Nothing about them without them. Keep things in perspective for yourselves, folks. Enjoy the journey. Embrace the chaos. Because it is chaos. Coaching is chaos. So you're going to make mistakes. The more experienced you are, doesn't matter how experienced you are going to make mistakes. Gourmet Margaret, thank you very much for your attention. I hope none of you are feeling like Homer right now. If you are, I apologise. If you want to talk a little bit more, you'll have my contact details whenever the PDF goes out. But never grow up and I look forward to your questions, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Owen. Extremely insightful presentation. We got a chance to have a look at it earlier on as well, and we're still trying to get an understanding of it, but it's absolutely fantastic. And you know, really, I suppose where we want to go within Waterford GAA and promoting the whole area of fun and enjoyment and an active start to Gaelic games. And you touched on the Wealth Kids initiative a bit earlier on, which I'll just finish off with at the end of the webinar for everybody. But a few questions coming in there. One here, it's actually very topical at the minute, with the impending open up under restrictions. How would you structure the opening series of gatherings or training sessions? I presume that person said, when we do re-engage with kids and build excitement.
Great, that's a great question, and it's very much along the lines of what's going to happen in coaches in terms of their own planning. For me, and again, this is my context, I wouldn't do very much. I would get them to make up their own games, get them, because they haven't seen their friends in so long, folks. You know, so if you're telling them what to do, oh, we're going to do the striking out both sides and we're going to shoot for points, just let them engage with their friends, talk to their friends, get them to make up their own games, asking them how they've been, getting them to come up with what interesting things did they do during lockdown, or you get them to know each other again, and for you to get to know them a little bit more as well. My supervisor, Dr. Sergio Larbercial, who's obviously the project manager of coordinator of ICOACHKIDS, Sergio done a Zoom webinar with his basketball team, and it was to engage them again. It was over Zoom, but this can be done face to face, and he talks about why we play. So why do we play for our team? And you could do that. What is it about us that is different to other teams? So then you're going into what the team means to them, what the club means to them, what their friends mean to them. And out of it, winning was not anywhere near it. Now, that doesn't mean they're not competitive, but it was about their development and about their relationships and about their environment. So going back to kind of the answer and the recap, have your equipment, and that, yes, get them to play the games and involve them in their skills, but don't say, you know, we're going to do this. It goes back to discovery. You know, put them in their groups, give them their equipment, make up their games, but also get to know them and give them time to get to know each other again, and just get used to being around each other, and you get used to being around them as well.
Really good on, I think, yeah, perfectly said. Next question in here, it says, I coach an under-8 team. How do I find the balance between keeping control in the group and letting the kids express themselves?
That's kind of something that I'm kind of struggling with sometimes as well, depending on the group. So the control element would be the safety element, and that's the control that I would have all the time. Basically, as I said before, it's their session, so there would be a lot of them making up their own games, me asking them questions, how can they change things? If they come back to me, oh, this is too easy, well, I'll put it back to them, and I say, well, how would you change the game? You make it harder then. Well, you shouldn't be coming to me, because during a game, they're not going to come to you, and if they do come to you, then you're not coaching what you should be coaching during the session. So decision making, creativity, getting them to think for themselves is a good way of doing it. So that control element for me would be the safety, just making sure they're not punching the head of each other, and that they are, you know, allowed to be children and allowed to be players. And I'll do this for adults, and the fact that it's under-8s, that's a difficult age. And if this is your first session with them, safety will be the biggest one. So again, you're getting to know them. You know that Owen Mooney and Owen Marcy, you don't know beforehand. You put Owen Mooney and Owen Marcy in a group together, and 5 minutes into that, we've been messing about. So straight away, you're going to take me out and put me in another group. You've got to know us. So you're not going to do that again. You're not going to put us in a group again. So a lot of the control element has to go back to kind of how you're grouping the children. I would never get the kids to pick their teams, because they're always going to, you know, you don't want somebody picked last. However, when I pick the teams, the last 2 or 3 children get to choose what group they want to go to. Now, if you're very cute in how you pick the teams, let's say me, Barry, Dunn and Owen Brannock are the last 3 picked. And I know for a fact that I'm going to pick Owen Marshy's group. So again, as a coach, the coach gives me a choice and I go, oh, I want to join group 4. Coach looks across, group 4 has Owen Marshy in it, and coach goes, no, you're not going in that group. And you have to pick another group. So that's fine, I don't mind that. But I thought, right, I want to join that group because I want to mess about. I want to have a bit of crack. So that would be the control element again. But again, in the groups, the more you get to know them, their behaviours, how they react with each other, who they can work with, who they work well with, that's then going to help you in terms of getting them to make up their games, getting them to talk to each other, questioning them. Again, it depends on your group. If they're absolutely off the walls and if they're a difficult, challenging group, setting the games up, as I showed you earlier on, going around them, saying this is how we play, but then going back to the start and thinking, oh, I can't remember this game. Hands up, okay, this is how you play the game. They're the captains, and then they're your mini leaders, but they have to do the way you have told them how to do the game, but they're still playing the games, if that makes sense. Now, it doesn't have to be games all the time. It could be game, little activity, target activity, a rest area, whatever that is. But again, that's the safety element and that's the control, but you still give them ownership by asking them questions and stuff as well. So again, it's whatever suits your own context. But again, going back to what I talked about earlier on, the rights of the child, Article 12, asking them their opinion. And again, they have a right to play. So it's not about the coach, it's about the children.
Thanks, Owen. Another question in here. Owen mentions developing the person for the pat. As a coach, I'm seeing a lot on player pathways, I suppose, and us as working within the GAA and been involved in the GAA, we see player pathways always mentioned. What are his thoughts on player pathways? Really, really good question.
So in terms of the player pathway for the GAA, now it's the F10 model. So it's an Australian framework, and it's more developmentally focused rather than the Estevan Bali LTAD plan and pathways that would have come out. And there's nothing saying that wasn't wrong, but the pathway was linear. So you move from active start to learn to train, train to train, train to compete, etc. So you move up the stages. But we know that development is not like that, because you might have a child, and especially in America, we had a lot from different sports. So you'd have a 14-year-old, phenomenal soccer player, plays basketball, but then they're coming to GAA as a 14-year-old, and they're 6 and 7-year-olds who are more skillful than they are. So the F10 model is more aligned with that. It's more aligned with the person is at the centre, and it's given them an opportunity to, the clubs to have an opportunity of, and the governing bodies in the counties, to be more aware of where each player might be in terms of their age and in terms of where they are in their development. And that'll help in terms of coaching, because what you don't want to do as a coach is lay the path for them so that whenever they're able to walk the path, and the path might take a couple of turns, but then it comes to a stop. And that might be a difficulty during a game. But because you haven't prepared the player for the path, then they don't have as many decision or as many problem solving skills as you would have with a player who has been developed for the path rather than the path for them. So the F10 model is a really good evidence-based kind of developmental pathway. And pathway is probably the wrong word for it. Developmental model would be a better way of putting it for me in terms of the research, because again, a pathway is A to B. That's kind of the connotation of it. But it is evidence-based and it's Australian-based. And I know there's a couple of other sports, basketball, for example, there's a few critical friends who have done F10 models for basketball from all of the foundation, talent, elite, and then mastery. Now, I know the GAA haven't brought in the mastery because there's no need. It's in the elite. And the mastery or the masters, inter-county masters, or the social play would be in the adult foundation stage. So it definitely helps the GAA in terms of the nature of the GAA, in terms of volunteer-based, community-based, and club player-based, because it has that foundation. And then the talent and the academies, and then obviously in terms of senior inter-county. So it's a good path. It's a good developmental model But again, it will be adapted. It is flexible, and that's another positive of it as well. That it's not laid in stone. It is adaptable. It is an adaptive framework, which is something that I'm doing for my own research. And again, that comes back to kind of critical realism and being aware of, if we need to change it, we will change it, and you can do that in the GAA F10 model.
Good stuff. Last question was, there's loads of questions in there, guys. So we're just going to do this the last question. How many times a week should we be coaching our juvenile teams, say under 11 down, as this person asked?
Oh, my word.
If you give you a long answer in this one, or if I give you a short
so
answer, maybe.
I'll give my context in New York and again in Ireland. So in America, at under-8s, the touch football, American football, some clubs would practice 3 times a week. Under-8s, 3 hours a day, right? Put that into context. In the GAA, in terms of Rockland, we encouraged all of our teams from under 6 to adult to practice twice a week, as well as the games of the weekend. Now, for under 12 down, it wasn't we wanted them twice a week and that was it. They had to come twice a week. No, because of the nature of New York and parents and busy lives, we want them to at least come to one practice. And one practice, as you've seen earlier on, was always game-based. Pick the teams, play internal games. And then one was a practice session with mini games and more purposeful play and purposeful practice, but also thinking about maybe what game you had at the weekend. So if you're thinking about, who you're going to play and how you're going to play, not in terms of tactics at under 10s or 12s. In fairness, at Rockland, we done performance analysis with under 8s, but that's a totally different webinar. And there was a rationale and a method to the madness, in fairness. There was a reason for it, and it worked out. There was loads of pizza and buns and stuff as well. But it's about giving them an opportunity to come. And if you practice once a week and a game at the weekend, they might be able to come to that practice. And if you practice twice a week, I would encourage twice a week. But again, there's no pressure to come because children are playing other sports, especially at that age, and should be encouraged to play multiple sports. And if you're player-centered and if your club is player-centered and a great environment, as many as possible for as long as possible, the best environment possible, they will come back no matter what you're doing. And in America, that showed, because in America, it's very much competitive winning because of the nature and culture, because of scholarships, etc. So that element of practice, play, fun, enjoyment, social relationships, not only for the players, but also for the parents and the club as a whole. So twice a week is plenty. 3 times a week, I would say it's too much. I would say that would be too much. Now, there's nothing to say that you couldn't offer 3 times a week, but then like you're expecting adults and coaches, you have to think about them as well. And again, at Rockland, I had to tell the coaches to have a break and the children to have a break, because they love coming and they enjoyed it. And it was a case of, no, listen, we're going to stop. We're stopping for 2 months to give yourselves a break. And they were climbing the walls, so it's whatever suits your context, but I would go twice a week. But again, no pressure. Try and get to at least 1 a week.
Brilliant. So that, guys, we're going to leave it there. Just before I go, 2 things really. First of all, Owen mentioned a WellKids initiative that we'll be launching fairly soon, and some clubs in Waterford have got a notification about it over the last few weeks. It's quite exciting, in terms of actually play and getting kids started at an early age, without the pressures maybe of throwing a hurley or a size 5 sliotar at them, or just getting them out to the club to have some fun and enjoyment. So that's the first thing, and I hope more people on the call will hear more about it over the coming weeks and months. Secondly, I'd like to thank Mr. Owen Mooney has given a fantastic webinar and for giving up his time, especially over the last week or 2 in putting it together. I know he put a lot of effort in putting it together. Any webinar he does, he doesn't just do it and then move on to the next one. He puts a lot of time into every webinar he does, and tweaks and changes to the context of us in Waterford and people in Waterford listening in. So Owen, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for doing it for us, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future. And for everyone on the call, I'd like to thank you very much for tuning in this evening, and we'll have another webinar in about 2 weeks' time, and hopefully we'll be back out playing sooner rather than later. Gurv Mahagovas, Slán Lat agus Gafol. Thank you.
Slán.